Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. If you could do me a quick favor, see that little subscribe button at the bottom of your screen? Go ahead, click that subscribe button. Really does help our channel grow, our audience grow, and I really do appreciate it more than you know. So click that subscribe button. Appreciate your support. Now, here's the video that you came here for.
All right, everybody. All right, back. Good to be back. So it's Wednesday afternoon. You know, the plan was to do a full episode of the Aaron Torres pod. You know, unfortunately, I do live in Los Angeles. Thankfully, I'm fine. My family's fine. But it's a little bit of a chaotic day. There's just a lot going on. Was not able to do a full episode. But I did want to take just a few minutes and react to, obviously, a busy Tuesday night in college hoops. The plan is to have a full show on Thursday afternoon leading into the college football playoff, talking a lot of college basketball from the Tuesday-Wednesday slate. But I want to spend just a few minutes talking about the big upsets from Tuesday night, specifically one. Listen, I don't think there's a huge takeaway from Florida beating Tennessee by 30, other than that Florida is a really, really, really good team. Tennessee losing even in that fashion, I don't think it's some indictment on who they are or what they are or are not capable of. So instead, what I want to do is focus on the team that Florida actually lost to on Saturday, and that's the Kentucky Wildcats. They go on the road. They travel to Georgia, and it's just ugly game, ugly loss if you're a Kentucky fan. Great win if you're Georgia. Listen, as a guy that's been a little bit critical of Mike White through the years, I think my nickname for him is Mediocre Mike White. Sorry about that. I got to take the L because Georgia gets the win 82-69. And we're now here in entering, the middle of January. Really, it's still the beginning of January. But it's kind of an interesting kind of resume that Kentucky has, right? 3 wins over teams that were ranked in the top 10 at the time that they played them. Obviously, that was Duke, Gonzaga, and Florida. But now 3 losses to teams that were unranked at the time that they played them, Ohio State, Georgia, and Clemson. I don't think any of those is crippling losses, by the way. All 3 could be tournament teams. But there's an interesting development, an interesting trend that I want to discuss because there is one thing throughout this season with Kentucky that is starting to concern me that I do think is a big picture issue that needs to be discussed. It's funny, right? Everybody wants to talk about the small picture things. I think, the small picture things lead to the big picture issue that I believe Kentucky has. So let's go ahead and dive in. So first of all, the game itself, what a stinker, what a clunker unless you're a Georgia fan. Tough watch, a lot of whistles. A million monitor reviews. The game started at 7 Eastern. I think it finished, and I'm not being sarcastic, like 9:45, 9:40. Missouri Vandy was on after. That game was basically at halftime by the time, or Missouri LSU, I guess. That game was basically at halftime by the time Georgia and Kentucky went off air. But again, Kentucky loses by 13. Georgia wins by 13. Listen, I know Kentucky fans were very frustrated with the whistle, and I think rightfully so. Georgia goes to the foul line 38 times, makes 29 of them. By comparison, Kentucky goes to the free throw line 15 times, only makes 19. So whenever you're minus 19 in free throws and you lose by 13, I mean, that's a pretty good indicator of how different things could be if there was a little bit more of a balanced whistle. Still, listen, listen, Kentucky fans, you can get mad at me if you want. I don't think that the whistle was why you lost. It wasn't a great performance. 6 of 25 shooting from 3. You get out rebounded by 7. Now, again, I understand that when your starting center gets in foul trouble early and can't get into a rhythm, that's part of it. But you still got beat up on the boards, 14 total turnovers. Again, you didn't shoot the ball very well. I just think that, to me, the refs weren't the reason that you lost. You lost for a variety of reasons, things that need to be cleaned up. But like I said, though, when I look at this Kentucky team, and we're now, what are we? Kentucky, let's take a quick look here. Kentucky, as we record here, is 15 games into their season. So they're basically at the halfway point of their season, 31 regular season games before the SEC tournament. And I do think that there's an interesting trend that's emerging that is starting to concern me. And I think a lot of people are kind of talking, in my opinion, about it wrong, right? I think we're focusing on the symptoms with Kentucky rather than the illness. What do I mean by that? When you get a cold, the symptoms are runny nose, headache, fever, whatever. But the fever isn't the illness. You got to figure out what the illness is to get it better. And then the symptoms are the fever, the runny nose, etc. And so when I see anyone talking about Kentucky, I hear, oh, they're too soft. Oh, they're too this. Oh, they're too that. Those are the symptoms. So what is the actual illness? What is the problem? And I believe, to me, the problem is pretty straightforward. It is that on a night-to-night, game-to-game basis, you literally have no idea what you're getting from anyone other than Lamont Butler on this team. And I do think it's time, 15 games into the season, to start to worry a little bit about this. We talked about it after the Ohio State loss. Don't panic. The percentages are going to even themselves out. But at a certain point, like, you kind of are who you are. And it is starting to concern me that on a game-to-game basis, you have no idea what you're going to get from essentially anybody on the team, right? And we're going to get into individual players and not be overly critical, but just be realistic. But listen, I think a good team, you can have a guy that only gets you 8 points per game or only gets you 4 points consistently, but maybe gets you 8, 9 boards. The problem is, can you get that consistently? And with Kentucky, they're just not getting any consistency from anyone other than Lamont Butler. Listen, I think all you got to do is really look at the last 2 games to kind of see what this team can look like at its best, but then also what it can look like when it's not at its best. I think the two polar opposites of Saturday, Rupp Arena against the top 10 Florida team, Tuesday on the road at Georgia, those are the perfect dichotomy of what you see at Kentucky at its best versus Kentucky not at its best. Kentucky at its best, Florida, Saturday, 6 players in double figures, 106 points, obviously 14 of 29 from 3. And you just go through the stats, right? Andrew Carr, 14 points. Amari Williams, 15 points. Otega Owe, 16 points on 6 of 10 shooting from behind the three-point arc. Jackson Robinson, 14 points, 5 of 12 shooting from 3. So guys are shooting well. They're scoring consistently. And listen, nobody's going to be perfect every game. But, you see in a performance like that, you're like, okay, this team's getting into a groove, whatever. Now fast forward to Tuesday. As I said, Lamont Butler was a double-figure scorer in both the Kentucky and Georgia game. But once you get past him, look at the same guys. Andrew Carr had 14 points against Florida, had 6 against Georgia on Tuesday night. Amari Williams, again, I know he was in foul trouble, but 15 points against Florida, 2 against Georgia. Otega Owe did have 12 points against Georgia on Tuesday night, but he shoots 4 of 13 from the field, 3 of 13 from the field, So, listen, he goes from one game shooting 6 of 10 from the field. I think I said 6 from 10 from 3, but 6 of 10 from the field to 3 of 13. It's a completely different player with completely different production. Jackson Robinson, 5 of 12 from 3 the last game for 5 of 12 from the field. I don't know why I keep saying from 3. 5 of 12 from the field last game for 14 points on Tuesday night. 5 points on 1 of 5 shooting from the field. And so I could go on, but I think that is a microcosm of this season. And again, it is a concern for me because, by the way, even when guys are scoring, it's not necessarily at a consistent clip, right? Otega Owe, because I had the fans say to me, well, Otega Owe scored in double figures every single game. It's like, okay, well, in the loss to Georgia, 3 of 13 from the field, as I just said. In the loss to Ohio State a few weeks ago, 4 of 13. So you can get 11, 12 points. Doesn't mean you're efficient. Doesn't mean you're productive. And what should be frustrating if you're not only a Kentucky fan, but if you're a staff member, these aren't a bunch of freshmen that are trying to figure out college basketball for the first time. I understand that they're new at their school, but these are guys that are college basketball veterans that you should know what you're getting from every single night. And listen, everybody's going to have an off night or two. I'm not saying everybody has to be Lamont Butler against Louisville and go 10 for 10 from the field. That's not realistic. But you should have a level of consistency even for players that are in their first year in a program. Look at all these other programs that brought in all these other players. You're getting consistency from those players, from those teams. Louisville's playing their best basketball right now. It's an entirely new team. Louisville with back-to-back really solid wins against Clemson and North Carolina. So that's just one example of a team that, yes, it's a bunch of new players, but Louisville's quietly won 5 straight since they lost to Kentucky a few weeks ago at Rupp Arena. So don't tell me it's only because the players are new. This is the world of college basketball. Everybody's bringing in new players. You have to be ready. You have to be willing to adjust, and you have to get more consistency. And so the good news, there's still time to figure it out. But the concerning news to me is, like, if you're a Kentucky fan, like, it's not getting easier. This is the SEC in 2025, okay? You look at the schedule, Georgia on paper was one of the easier road games you're going to have. Mississippi State this weekend. Listen, Mississippi State's a real team now. Mississippi State, as we stand 14-1, 2-0 in the SEC, they're physical, they're tough. You don't bring your hard hat against Mississippi State, you're going to lose that game. Like, I'm just telling you, Mississippi State isn't the most crazy offensively gifted team. They'll beat your brains in, though. They're going to tough you around, push you around, physical you around, and if you're not ready to play, we're going to have big problems. A couple weeks from now, you got to go to Tennessee. Listen, I know Tennessee lost by 30 to Florida. Tennessee's a real team. Tennessee's a monster, especially at home. At Alabama later in the year. Ole Miss is an NCAA tournament caliber team. We're recording before they play Arkansas, but they're really good. You're lucky in the sense that you get Auburn exclusively at home, Florida exclusively at home, Arkansas exclusively at home. But it's like Mississippi State, Tennessee, Ole Miss, whoever. These are tough games. Vandy's not a pushover this year. So if you're Kentucky, listen, I think there's got to be a little bit of a come to Jesus thing right now where you need consistency from some players. And you got to bring it every night. And it can't be in, can't be out, can't only be in the big games, the big opponents, the big crowds, the big this, the big that. Can't just be when you're at Rupp Arena in front of 20 of your own 1,000 people. If you want to reach your potential, and I still believe this team has about as much potential as anybody in this conference. Maybe Auburn's a little bit above everybody else, but listen, Kentucky's got the ability to play with and beat anybody, but you need that level of consistency. So we'll see what happens. Kentucky at Mississippi State on Saturday night. The hump's going to be rocking. And if you think it's going to get any easier, don't know what to tell you. It is not. Appreciate you guys listening. Be back full episode on Thursday afternoon, breaking down 2 nights of college hoops. Then, of course, we'll obviously look ahead to the college football playoff. By the way, we did do a college football playoff preview show yesterday, which would have been Tuesday, which is available on YouTube and podcast.